Hello BookTube, today I'm going to do the last 10 books tag, which was created by Marc Nash. So let's just get right into these really interesting questions. I'll put a link to his original video down below where you can also get kind of the clean version of all of his interesting questions. First one, what was the last book you didn't finish? And that was the Iron Dragon's Daughter by Michael Swanwick, which it's a kind of a fantasy science fiction book, which really good writing. I'd listened to some of his short stories, kind of done by I think Podcastle or Escape Pod or something like that. But I found this book really frustrating because it would start and then it would stop, and then it would restart again and then it would stop, and it was like, it was so busy, kind of subverting. We're gonna frustrate your things like that it frustrated me. And I just sort of ended up losing patience with it. I didn't find all this examination of genre stuff fascinating enough to actually continue with. So yeah, I gave up on that. Next question. What was the last book that you reread? Which was this literary gem, Centaur's Isle by Piers Anthony. Piers Anthony is definitely, people say, oh, I don't have guilty reads. I have guilty reads. One of them would be Piers Anthony, at least as an adult. I read Piers Anthony as a kind of horny preteen boy or teen boy. And it's very light escapist fantasy, really bog standard, hero, you got the white hero guy, and he's got, his female sidekick and all the friendly animals in this kind of in some ways creative world with tons of puns in it. Anthony just got more and more pun happy as he went along. As you can tell by Century Isle, and it's not an isle, it's an isle, isn't that sort of that level of humor. The thing that probably makes them really cringeworthy is that it's also got a whole bunch of, it's sex farce for preteens, which I can't imagine anyone getting away with nowadays. But it was like, as a horny young fellow, these books with all their jiggly bits and all that was, it's very much kind of naughty sex farce stuff. But yeah, read for things, and I decided to I was like, oh, I should pick one up and just see what it's like. And it was like, oh, this is terrible. But then I read the next one. And yeah, there's a reason why they were giant bestsellers. And, everyone liked these. I had female friends who loved these books as well, which is like, considering, I think it's kind of like he's the dirty old man of fantasy books. I mean, I don't know if he's the only one, but it's interesting that it shows the power of his writing in a kind of commercial, just appealing sense. So, question number 3, what was the last book that you bought? And here I can actually hold up an actual physical book because it was a physical book that I bought, which is the Shades of Milk and Honey by Mary Robinette Kowal. Kowal. I've listened to her a lot on Writing Excuses. It's a podcast kind of. You've got 15 minutes, and let's give you good writerly advice with her and Brandon Sanderson and Dan Wells and that cartoon guy whose name I can't remember right now. I've read her short story Lady Astronaut, and I like that. And she's always she's always got like really smart advice. So I'm looking forward to reading what I believe is her first novel. Next question is, what's the last book you said that you read but you didn't? And, that's probably a question that I'd probably, other than, I bluffed my way through because I forgot to do the reading in a class, years upon years ago in university or college. Probably around the same time, hanging out with other young hipster people trying to impress each other, I may have lied and said something. But to be honest, I can't remember now what it was. And for the most part, I'll cop to, I think I would cop to. So I think I have to say I'm old and I can't remember. I would definitely not say I'm innocent of that crime. What's the last book that you wrote in the margins of? And that would be probably The Life of Johnson by Samuel Boswell, which I just finished a little while ago, but I'm being very ruthless and just like, if I'm not going to reread this in like the next 10 years, and it was a really natty paperback, which indeed I wrote in, it was going to fall to bits. I'm not going to read that copy in 10 years' time, so I got rid of it. It was definitely the last one that I wrote marginalia in, especially since it was such a kind of just this dumpy, falling apart paperback, which I'd take together, and it was like, yeah, okay, I can trash this without any qualms, and not, I'm pretty sure I put it in the donate bin. I didn't try and sell it on to some poor person for to look at my what I'm sure were super insightful underlinings and exclamation marks. Next question is, what was the last book you had signed? And, I've enjoyed people's kind of recounting of getting their books signed and all that stuff. I've never seen the point in it. I've never wanted to have one-on-one conversations with authors, probably because I'd be so awkward and terrible. Actually, that's the most entertaining part of a lot of those videos that I've seen. Lonesome Reader, Eric Carl Anderson, him talking about his awkward encounters with readers. It was very entertaining to hear about his awkward encounters with authors. I do not want to live my own awkward encounters with authors, much less, I don't know, there's something about getting to know them. For a while there, I was in a creative writing program at UVic, at University of Victoria, where I now am, funny happenstance, have moved back to Victoria, where I had all these professors, and for the most part, I enjoyed that. I got kind of interesting insights into writing and help with my writing that didn't go anywhere. But it was funnily enough, I never ever read anything that they wrote themselves, because it felt like I would interfere with me taking in their advice. And then now that I know them as people, I have no desire to actually go and read their books, which is, it's kind of a funny thing brains are. So yes. What's the last book that you lost? I don't think I've ever actually lost a book. Not one that I was in the midst of reading. I think if I'd lost a book I was in the midst of reading, that would have given me a complete mental infarction. You get that, like, oh, I can't find my book before I'm about to go to bed, and you basically spend half an hour tracking it down and finding it. I've done that. I got to the end of Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. There's my handy visual aid for that. I got to the very last page and it was missing. And the last page of the book was missing, so I lost the last page of the book, which was terrible. It really damaged my reading of a book that I was really enjoying. But that just, I still have that memory. Like, I lost the last page, and I went and tracked down and read that last page, but having that interruption there right at the very end was terrible, and I think I'm going to have to let that book lie for a good long time, get a book, get another copy of it, flip through, make sure I got all the pages, and then reread it at some point in the far future. That's trauma. Yeah, book trauma. What's the last book you had to replace? The last book I had to replace was A Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert A. Heinlein, who as a young teen, I loved Robert A. Heinlein. I now come to Robert A. Heinlein. I haven't actually reread this because I know that the Suck Fairy will have surely visited it, and I will find all the sexist and really problematic stuff in it, and probably a lot of other things that I uncritically swallowed as a child, as a young man. But the reason I had to replace it was because I was reading in the bath one night, and it's the only book that I've ever done that in, where I dropped my book in the bath, and sadly, it dissolves. All the glue dissolved. I carefully dried out the book, and I've kept it as a reminder of dangers of bath reading. I mean, I still read in the bath. I love reading in the bath, but it's my talisman of like, oh, this is my one bath-related disaster. But 49 years and only one bath-related disaster so far. Of course, yeah, knock on wood, because that means I'll probably drop my Kobo or my phone into the bath one now, and I'll have another far more costly book bath disaster. Final question was, or not final question. What's the last book? There's a lot of lasts in this thing. What's the last book you had an argument over? I still do listen to this podcast, which I won't name for obvious reasons. And he would the host would encourage you to become his Goodreads friend so he could read your reviews of books that he happened to be reviewing. And so he reviewed Slaughterhouse-Five, and he loved Slaughterhouse-Five. He thought it was just the best book ever, which, many people do, and he felt very passionate about it. And he got to the end of his podcast, and he's like, oh yeah, everyone loves it, everyone loves it. And then he got to my review, where to be honest, I found, like, especially, there's this, Vonnegut's got this repetition of this phrase, so it goes, which, for whatever reason, I found really tedious after a while. It just got on my nerves. It was just like, and so it goes, until it's one of those, like, something gets repeated so much it becomes meaningless to you, and it didn't accumulate power as it does, obviously, for so many readers. It just became this tedious thing, and for whatever reason, the book, it just didn't. I could see, like, kind of like, the power in the book, but I also just saw, but it wasn't a book for me. He called me a fucking idiot. And I was like, oh. And so I stopped I kept on listening to his podcast because he's a really good reviewer of books, which is why I'm not going to mention his name, because I don't want to put anyone off actually listening to him, or, him coming after me and saying more mean things about me and my fucking stupid opinions on books. I unfriended him in Goodreads and kept on listening to his podcast, then secure in the fact that he wasn't going to run across any more of my reviews and we were going to have more fights. So I guess, as sort of an argument, though, of course, now that you look at it, what happened? I ran away like a complete coward. So yeah, if you don't like any of my reviews, I'll probably just, jump into the comments and profusely apologize and tell you that you're completely right and delete the review. So, here's a solid book critic for you. Hopefully I'll just keep it up. I'm keeping up all this other nonsense, so I guess we'll see. The last question is, what's the last book you couldn't get a hold of? Which, it's funny, Marc and I are probably about the same age, so we probably come from a time when, you didn't have the internet and it wasn't just super easy access of, like, I can basically get whatever I want, within 5 minutes I'll order something online and it'll be winging its way to me. What I still find I do is, like, I read Hild by Nicola Griffith, which is just this amazing book about, let's go with, it's an amazing book that you should really check out, and I'm not going to try and describe it right now because, of course, it's all vaporized from my mind. But it's like, I'd really like to. I read it as an ebook copy because I'm trying to read most stuff ebook wise, and not accumulate more and more books. I'm actually trying to read and then release the books that I already have. But it was one of these things of, okay, this is Hild, something that I'm going to look for in secondhand bookstores. And actually, I'm going to be going to Portland for a vacation soon, Portland, Oregon, and I can go to Powell's and I can search through Powell's for Hild. And I love having that, like, little book hunt thing. And I on purpose, I'm sure I could just find it online, cheap, in about 2 seconds. But I'm not going to. I've purposely made something hard for myself to find, and I like that. So yeah, that's the last book. That's the last 10 books book tag, and I encourage everybody out there to give it a try. Definitely go check out Marc's original video on it, because he's got some really interesting stories and questions from it. It's a neat one. I really look out for these ones that are. I have a lot of times with questions. Like someone like, what's your favorite character who you want to have dinner with, or it's like, my mind just goes blank. But this, for some reason, these questions just kind of opened up my my loose lips, and I thus babbled this long. So yes, hope you enjoyed that. If you made it this long, more videos later.